Hello students, in today's session we are going to discuss functions from JavaScript. Okay, so we know what is a function. So function is nothing but when you want to group some set of statements together, we'll be creating functions. So in JavaScript, how we are going to create a function? So in function will be divided into two things basically. It is like header and compound statements, or it is also called as body of the function. So header, it will start with the keyword called as function. So whenever I want to write a user defined function in JavaScript, we're going to start with a keyword. That keyword is nothing but function. So function is the keyword which is used to write a function. It will be followed by the function name and the parameters. Okay. So that what we are going to define it as function header, which contains the name of the function and the parenthesis, which this parenthesis contains the parameters. Okay, list of parameters that will be used in the function. And every function will have a return statement. So which returns the control from the function uh, after executing the function to the calling function or function which is after executing the set of statements, it will go back to the calling function. Okay, so which is done with the help of return statement, which is written in the body of the function. In the body of the function will include return statement. Okay, so when return will be executed after execution of any set of statements, so it will return back to the calling function again after that. So you can see a simple example here where you have a function which is the keyword, function name called as fun, and you have the parenthesis, and we have written some set of statements here. The statements will be using document.write, and that will be our output. The output will be something like surely is fun. Okay, so that is our output when I execute this or when I call this function called as fun. Okay, so because JavaScripts are objects, their reference can be properties. Okay, so properties in other objects, so which in case they act as methods. So whatever functions we are going to write, which will be acting as properties of an object, or it acts as a method. Okay, now next, coming for local variables, we have discussed variables. So variables will be the like values that change throughout the program. The values that change throughout the program is nothing but our local variables. Now local variables is, so that depends on something called as scope. So this scope is nothing but it represents the lifetime. Okay, it represents the lifetime of any variable. So from the which function to which function it is available, or from what time to what time that particular variable is available, which is defined by scope. Okay, scope of a variable is the range of statements over which it is visible. So where it is visible and where it is not visible. If I write something like within, if I create a function, say if I just go to notepad, and if I write something like function, and I'll write the function name, and I'll write opening brackets and closing brackets, and if I write something like integer, or sorry, this is, we're going to write variable x equals to 5. So when once I write this variable x, what we have defined, this variable's lifetime is only between these two opening brackets and closing brackets. This x will not be available if I write one more function. So function, say the function name is abc, and I'll close this function here. Now if I try to write something like variable y equal to x, now this will give us an error because x is defined only within this function called as fun. This is not available for this function called as abc, because this function is local, or this variable what we have defined x, this variable is a local variable that is available only in function fun. It is not available with function abc. Okay, so which will represent the scope, and that scope is considered as visibility. Visibility is nothing but to what extent or from where to where the particular say variable is available, that was represented by visibility. Next, when JavaScript is embedded in HTML, the scope of variable is the range of lines of the document over which the variable is visible. So that is, what does that mean is, when you embed a JavaScript and HTML, the variable's visibility is only within the document. Okay, only within the document the variable is available. It is not available outside the document. Okay, so variables that are implicitly declared have global scope. So if you declare a variable which are implicit, which are by default it is global, which will have having global visibility. Okay, so that is, it will be visible within or with entire or XHTML, or within the HTML document it will be available. So which is like global scope. Next, coming for, it is usually best for the variables that are used only within the function to have local scope. So the variables, if you define only within the function, then it will be having the scope of local variable, that is, it is visible only within the function. If I define a variable outside the function, then it will be having global scope. Okay, so any explicitly declared with where in the body will be having body of a function has local scope, as I discussed. So if I declare a variable within a function, it will be having local scope. Okay, so if a variable is defined both as local and as a global variable appears in the function, the local will be variable will be having precedence, effectively hiding the global variable. Say if you have two variables, one defined outside the function, other defined inside the function with the same name, then we'll be giving the precedence for the local variable, not the global variable. Okay, next, coming for parameters. Parameters, as you know, if you write any function name called as fun, and if I write x comma, if I write x comma y, this x comma y what we have written, it this x comma y is considered as parameters. Okay, so which will be having two things. One is like your um, actual variables or actual parameters, and will also have formal parameters. Actual parameters is like the values, so the values that you give, so the values that you pass in calling function, which is like actual parameters. And formal parameters is the parameter that you use in the sub function or functions header, which is called as formal parameters. JavaScript uses only one method, which is called as call by value. So you might have studied call by value, call by reference, but JavaScript will be usually using call by value. Okay, so when a function is called, the values of actual parameters specified in the call. Okay, when you're calling a function, so the values that you specify in the calling function will be sent to the corresponding formal parameters. So this is just like any other programming languages which you have already studied, like local variable, I mean say local actual parameters as well as formal parameters. So actual parameters, the values from the actual parameters will be copied to formal parameters. Okay, so it will also check for type. So which type of data you are sending, that will also be checked when you are sending the parameters. And also the number of parameters in the function call is not checked against the number of formal parameters in the called function. So this is done in other programming languages, but here they're mentioning that the number of parameters in the number of parameters is not checked with the number of parameters in formal formal parameters. So we're not going to check how many number of parameters are there in the actual parameters and the formal parameters. It is not going to be checked. Okay, only we are going to check what type of parameter we are going to use. Okay, so in the function, excess actual parameters that are passed are ignored. If you are sending any other more than one parameters, it will be ignored. So all parameters are communicated through property values. So property values called as arguments that are others, I mean, like other array objects, it will also considered as, it will also have some length, that is proper parameters length. So you can see if you want to access the number of arguments that you have, you can use arguments.length. That will give us the number of arguments actual parameters have passed. You can see as a small example here. You have a function called as params. You have two arguments here. So these are formal arguments. So this is formal arguments because this is present in the function header. So function header has this parameters. Okay, so which is considered as formal. Okay, and you can see here you have params of one value you are sending. So this function is passing only one value, that is only one parameter. This is like your actual parameters. Okay, this is like your, sorry for that. Yeah, so this is actual parameters which is sent from the calling function. Okay, so calling function is going to send this values which are actual parameters. So here you have two parameters, here you have only one parameter, and in this we have three parameters where one will be ignored. We are going to ignore one parameter because in formal we have only two parameters that I have defined here. So here we are going to ignore one parameter, or one value will be ignored, which is the last one. Okay, so that is about how to define a function and how to access the function. If you see, when the first function call happens, it is going to say the number of parameters are passed to one, so it is going to display the value. So if you are passing two parameters, it's going to display all the two. If you're going to send three parameters, it's going to display all the three. So that is, it is going to consider that as an array by using arguments dot length. So whatever parameters you're going to send, these parameters will be stored into an array called as arguments. So in this arguments array, first parameter what you're going to send, it will be stored at 0. Second parameter will be at 1. Third parameter will be at the second index. So based on that, it is going to display all the different types of parameters. Okay, we are not displaying a and b, we are displaying all the values. Okay, now next coming for the other example they have given of the same functions. You can just go through the example. Next, sort method. Sort method, whenever if you need to sort something other than string, like numbers, numerical integer values, or floating point values, in that case I can use this method called as sort method. So you can see we are just using the numbers list dot the method called as sort, and this is the array where you will have the sorted numbers. Sorted numbers will be stored into this array called as number order. Okay, so this is an example for how to sort a given array numerical values, or any set of floating point values can be sorted by using this function called as sort. There is an example here, you can just go through the example, which is sorting. Next we'll come across what is constructor. Constructor is a special member function that we already know. It is used to initialize the properties of a newly created object. When a new object is created, if you want to initialize some properties of the object, in that case we'll be using constructor. Okay, every expression, every new expression must include a call to the constructor. Thus we have already discussed, when you are creating an object, we'll be using the new keyword followed by the constructor. By default we will be calling the default constructor, which does not have any parameters. So constructor must be able to refer to the object on which it is to operate. It is going to create, or it is going to give a reference to the object to which it is accessing. JavaScript has predefined set of variables for this purpose by name called as this keyword. This we already discussed. When you see this keyword, it will point to what? It will point to the current object. The current object, whatever you have, that current object will be pointed by the keyword called as this keyword. When the constructor is called, this is a reference to newly created object. This variable is used to construct and initialize properties of an object. If you see, we have created a function called as car. Under this car we have new car, new make, new model, and new year, and this is a function. So if you observe, we are creating an object here called as my car new, and the object or the class name will be something like car. It is having these parameters. Okay, so that is nothing but, when this is called, it is going to call this constructor by name car, and it is going to initialize these values there for that particular object. So once I access my car, if I use my car dot new make, it is going to display, or when I use my car dot make, it is going to display Ford. If you can see here, we have this dot make that will be displaying Ford. You can see the output here, it will be displaying Ford. So car model, it will be displaying some value here, and car year, it is displaying 2000. So whenever you want, by using constructor, you can make an object to point to its constructor when it is called, and if you can initialize, you can initialize the values to that particular constructor. Okay, so this is where we want to stop this session. In the next session we are going to discuss parenthesis matching, and we have left it with two more topics. Once I finish that, we are going to complete your JavaScript. Okay, thank you. I'm going to end the session here. In the next session we are going to discuss parenthesis matching. Thank you.